1 out of 5 packages of seafood is mislabeled. 1/5. So chances are real good that if you eat fish and purchase it at a retailer shelf, chances are real good over the course of, say, a year that you've been eating something that was not
as
labeled correctly.
So we have these labels. Maybe it says it's salmon, or it says it's rainbow trout, or it says it's tuna. You as the consumer have some faith that what you're purchasing is in fact as represented on that label. You are paying premium dollar for inferior product, and that's just happening across the board. One of the health effects that we've seen certainly are things like Escolar or butterfish being sold under the label White Tuna. Oh, Escolar is a nasty little fish. If you cook it right, it's pretty good, but it produces by weight something like 20% of its body weight is an indigestible fatty acid, and it leads to a certain gastrointestinal distress. If you eat enough of it, you could land in the hospital.
Really? As consumers, what can we do to safeguard ourselves against this fraudulent
Go catch
activity?
your pickerel and then cut it up yourself.
There's that.
That's it.
There's that.
You know?
This episode of Outdoor Journal Radio is brought to you in part by the Invasive Species Centre, protecting Canada's land and water from invasive species. Freedom Cruise Canada, rent the boat, own the memories. J&B Cycle and Marine, your home for all things power sports, boats, and equipment. And Sail, the ultimate destination for your outdoor adventures. Hey, everybody, how you doing? I'm Angelo and Reno Viola. He's Peter Bowman. We're ready to go. Can you tell I'm in a hurry? Because I got to get to our first and only guest on this episode. I'm really excited
You're
about it.
You're never in a hurry. Come on, what are you doing?
I'm in a hurry because I originally heard about this story, I don't know, a couple decades ago. We did a show on the old Outdoor Journal radio program on the Fan 590.
Yes.
And
what was the show
I
about?
was
What was the show
fascinated
about?
by the subject.
Can you tease the audience a little bit here?
Would it shock you to know that 1 out of 5 packages of fish that you're purchasing and or either purchasing at the store to cook and consume on your own, or getting it from a fast food store already prepared, or like a sushi bar, for example, 1 out of 5 of the products that you're consuming is mislabeled.
Ooh,
in other words, it's something that it ain't.
Come on now.
That's a bunch of bullshit.
Here's a statement for you. Your snapper is not a snapper.
No.
How's that?
Oh, my.
That's it. As true a statement as it gets right there.
And so a little later on, we'll be joined by an expert in the field. His name is Matthew Morris. He's at the Ambrose University in Calgary. And they're doing a study on, and what they actually do is just go out to these places and they undercover, they sample these products, and then they take a DNA sampling of it, and they'll tell you whether you're really buying a cod or you're buying a fraud. That's basically
Cod or
it.
fraud.
That's a good
Nice.
title.
I like that.
I did that all on my own.
That was organic. That was as organic as it gets.
Whether you're buying
I'm going
cod
to DNA
or
test that to make sure you did that right, because I don't know if that's organic or not.
That's all coming up. His name is
Very
Matthew Morris, and he'll be joining us to talk to us about this incredibly alarming study.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
On the other side of that coin, by the way, hello, Dean Taylor. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
Lovely today with your red and black.
I wear this on almost every podcast I've noticed now. I think it's my uniform.
You're making it your uniform?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Did I mention he's Peter Bowen? And I'm Angelo
now.
Viola.
Wearing his my chartreuse,
true.
lime chartreuse.
I'm going to talk about that in a moment. That's lovely. That's a unique.
one
that's
of.
one of those one-ofs
That's
that you got to keep from wearing it. The lovely vulva behind the camera as usual. He's particularly interested in today's subject matter
Yes, absolutely.
because he
That's
wants
a bunch of
to
bullshit.
laugh at us. He wants to sneer at us. He's saying, "See, if you would be like me, don't consume anything that walks and moves, and you have to chase to
right.
eat.
That's
And you won't
right.
have any of these problems with mislabeling. Nick over here. Give me a hell yeah! Of course, I already mentioned Dean over there. So, in the meantime, I mentioned this lovely shirt that you've got on. No, you will not find that. If you go to Fishing Canada, the store, you will not find that shirt. In fact, this we had made up just for Mr. Bowman because he is so special that we thought, you know what? He should have something that nobody else has. And that's why that exists today.
It's a bunch of bullshit.
Thank you.
No,
Dean.
no, it could have been true. Why do you like?
So there's only one of these. So if I go around this place and I go all over, but I can find one more. If I find one more, then that's a bunch of bullshit.
There may be a couple of them, but the problem is that they were made erroneously.
They were mislabeled.
Mislabeled, just like the fish that we're going to find
Everything's
out
This
about.
is a tilapia. This is actually a tilapia, not a shirt.
That's right. But if you do go there, you'll see all the wonderful stuff that we have for you, not mislabeled, including all the Outdoor Journal swag and the wonderful Fishing Canada stuff and new product that's just been put up there. You got to go and you got to check it out.
When is our new stuff coming up? That stuff we've been working on and keeping secret and all that. Those
Well,
new
it depends on when this airs.
This is
you
supposed
never
to
know.
air like
Will it be
first week of December.
Do you think we'll get this stuff out for Christmas? This new product?
I'm hoping.
Oh,
that
Nikolai.
that's-
Oh, fingers crossed. Okay, Nick says fingers crossed.
Got
so-
everything crossed over there.
Okay.
It's up to him, I guess.
It's up to Nick. Oh boy, we better crossboard our fingers then.
There are some wonderful new products that will be.
It's looking,
there
that's
in
that. That was a
time
little
for
tease I
Christmas.
threw out there. It's
Yeah.
pretty. Some pretty cool stuff coming out, folks.
Well,
so.
they're going to get my money for sure because
Oh,
I'm going
God,
to get
yeah.
one of each. One of each of them.
You already have one of each. Every
I do
time
not have. I
you
keep
got
telling you.
everything.
No,
Every
I
time you
do
come in here, you
not.
get something different on.
I do not.
He still hasn't wore the hoodie on the screen yet.
No.
We do need a.
That
We've
would
been
be
requesting that.
and he definitely needs that.
Are
one
you
too.
sure I have that? Because quite honestly,
Is he
I
got-
don't recall having that.
Nick, has he got that, or did you steal it from him?
See, I told you he owns everything.
He
I
owns a
own.
lot of stuff. I had a conversation with Nick not that long ago, and he says, "Yeah, Grandpa," he said to Matt and I, "Come on over to the house, and I got to get rid of a bunch of this stuff." He says they just loaded boxes of your hoodies and stuff from past
like Goodwill.
sponsors.
It's like the Goodwill.
I love it.
Yeah. Anyways, moving on. That's all happening at fishingcanada.com, the gateway, the portal to your next fishing adventure.
Or shop.fishingcanada.com.
You can do that.
Come on
too.
now.
I prefer you go to
Let's
the front.
mention them both just to
I
get
prefer
it.
you go to the front.
Yeah.
Listener feedback.
Yeah.
Mr. Bowman.
At Ladybug. Oh, sorry.
Are
go
we
ahead.
going to assume that this is a female or a male?
Here's the name, at Ladybug Adventures via YouTube. So you could find that out very quickly. Probably the YouTube, either the little profile picture or maybe at Ladybug Adventures has
But we
some
do have
videos.
a story later on about a guy who.
Yes, there's ladybugs mentioned in the
Yeah, it's
in
all
the story.
connected. They're
So it's a
all
connect.
the
Dean
stories.
always connects these stories up, but
So
right
there's
now
a connection.
There's a
Ladybug
connection.
Adventures.
You'll have to wait and tune in.
Can you tell me what the connection with this image behind me is?
She responded to this. He or she responded to this episode.
Okay. So Ladybug Adventures via YouTube, at Ladybug Adventures via YouTube, is in response to our discussion on mandatory barbless hooks, it says here.
Yeah, that was like interspersed with all these interviews. We went into a passionate discussion.
So
about
why didn't you
barbless
have an image of a barbless hook on here?
I thought that looked better.
Because that's misleading, though.
Well, no, because if you're watching on YouTube right now, you can probably tap somewhere on the screen here, and you can get right to that video.
'Cause that-
see the source.
I feel I misled.
you
much,
must not like that picture of you there.
Much
Something,
like-
something wrong with this
I
picture of
thought
him. Look
it's
at
a
it.
nice picture.
He looks
much
happy.
like the story that we're about to talk about
I look
here
like
later
I'm going to
on.
slap Scott Martin on the back of the shoulder. Smack.
See, this is mislabeling to me, just like the fish stories that's coming up.
That's a great image,
Clickbait.
Dean. I like that.
Clickbait. Look at all the people up
Yeah,
there.
it's clickbait. This is what it's all about here, bro. Come on,
At
get with the
Ladybug
program.
Adventures via YouTube says, in response to our discussion on mandatory barbless hooks, episode 144, for those of you who are as confused as I am,
Come on
That'd be
now.
that episode
Dean
right there.
putting this
See
up.
that up there, episode 144 up top there?
she
Come on
says, she
Hey,
or he,
Ladybug says.
Ladybug says, I use barbless for salmon, rainbow, steelhead, and carp with really good results. I've pinched down some of my trebles on the crankbait and jerk baits also without losing fish that often. So she says, so much easier to release fish and untangle from anything. I try to promote this, but Ontario anglers are so stubborn.
Yeah, we are.
I actually
We're a
do
stubborn
agree.
lot.
I feel like Ontario anglers are the worst for this,
I agree 100%.
and I don't know why.
It's the only jurisdiction in this country that is really dragging its feet on this whole barbless hook issue.
Yeah,
I think
it's
it should
from
be a
the-
no-brainer.
right from the government. Because honestly, guys, let's be honest, a lot of people don't even know what barbless hooks are. A lot of anglers. It's not even talked about here in Ontario, right? So if you don't know what it is, they're listening right now. They're saying, "What the hell are they talking about?" You know?
Are we going to make an assumption that at Ladybug Adventures via YouTube is not from Ontario or is from Ontario?
That's a great question. I'm gonna. I try
I'm
to
say
promote
they're
this.
not from here, but lives here now.
And that's why she can
Maybe
poo-poo, she can poo-poo on Ontario anglers.
that makes sense.
Because
That
they're
makes
originally not
good,
from
good,
here.
Good call, Dean. That's a
Right?
good call. Yeah, because the ladybug would know the benefits and has obviously practically used it.
Ladybug, I just, if I have to say, I would say is probably from Western Canada. That's what I'm thinking. So Ladybug, if you're listening, can you let us know at Ladybug Adventures via YouTube?
You want to know where or what sex?
Just, am I right? No, I just want to know, are we talking about a transplanted Albertan or BC or Saskatchewan native?
What is the province with the most barbless regulations? What
I
is
would
the most
say BC.
BC's got to
BC?
be.
BC,
Yeah.
and right behind is Alberta. And let's not forget
Manitoba?
Newfoundland.
Isn't Manitoba barbless part of that too? No.
No. Newfoundland definitely is barbless. I think the whole province is barbless. in
Lots of New
Newfoundland.
Brunswick, Nova Scotia too, right?
Yeah, they're
yeah.
definitely there. I think ourselves and maybe Quebec are the only two areas left where we really don't have a firm policy on it at all. We talk about it, right? We often say, well, you know what, we should go barbless. But at the end of the day, and him and I are guilty of this. We talk about it here. We use this, we get up on our soapbox and we preach from the pulpit.
Well,
but at the end of the day, let me tell you right now,
You're
folks,
more of a preacher in that one. I'll give you the kudos on that
Yeah,
one.
'cause
Because I don't really
you
talk
don't
much
you
about
don't even want to discuss barbless.
Nah, I just
God forbid.
if I got barbs, I might as well use them, right? You
got the things. That's what God gave
Lord
them to
put
you for.
barbs on a hook, so might as well keep them on there. When I get that 6-pound smallmouth and he's jumping about 16 times on that jerkbait, on that said jerkbait, oh no, please stick in there, stay in there.
Did you mention conservation? Is that why we were talking barbless hooks? Because it could help preserve some of the species, sports species that we so much love.
You know what? It would. Yeah, it does facilitate an easier release for sure. I will say that at times. There's other times it doesn't, but it does sometimes help.
Because this is a time that we talk about an invasive species that is possibly putting some of our favorite sport fish in peril.
Would it be the grass carp? Is that what
The
you're
grass
talking
carp,
about again?
I'm talking about the Invasive Species Center.
Oh.
And AsianCarp.ca in particular.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Who are hoping that we give out this message to folks each and every episode, and we will continue to do so until we're told to stop. Is that right, Dean?
That is right.
That's right. The grass carp, one of 4 members of the Asian carp family, and it is a consumer of aquatic plant. And along with you mentioned something on the last episode that was actually an error, but I know how you were saying it, so I will take this opportunity to fix that now. Peter mentioned that not only do they consume vegetation, but that they also consumed microplankton
Zooplankton?
and zooplankton, which was totally wrong. However, he's right, because those creatures also depend heavily on vegetation.
So when they open their filter feeding, they're not getting
they're not
zooplankton
filter-
in
They're
there?
not filter feeders. No.
They don't do that at all?
No.
No? Not any of the Asian carp?
Maybe one by accident in its lifetime may have choked on some
I think they all. I mean, anything that opens their mouth under the water gets zooplankton, right? I'm assuming when a bass
Sure,
hits
let's go with that.
When a bass hits a
But in fact, in case any of you picked it up last episode, no, they do consume vegetation only, but in that vegetation, of course, is all of these tiny little zooplankton invertebrates type of thing that other fish.
So they're not like a
survive
whale.
on.
They're not like a filter feeder like that.
No, they're
right?
not. We could, say they are, but that would be.
I don't want to mislead anybody.
I want to be
nasty
accurate
things.
in the messaging on this program, as the audience probably knows. I'm all about. I'm not about mislabeling things like we'll talk about later on in the program.
True that. I like that.
The good news of this whole story is that there are currently no established breeding populations of this critter, this grass carp, in the Great Lakes or any other Canadian waters. They have DNA sampling.
They've shown up a little bit.
That's correct.
Here and there.
That's right.
Not many, but they have shown up.
So what we need to do, all of us need to get on the bandwagon, and we need to arm ourselves with the knowledge that it takes to identify this fish and also to know what to do if and when in the eventuality, and it's going to happen, that we will all start encountering them in the wild.
I hate the way you say that.
Wow.
It's going to happen.
I mean,
and,
it's inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they're already here, I mean, it's inevitable that it's going to happen, right?
Do you think that there'll be more Asian carp in the Great Lakes than Atlantic salmon at some time? Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, that would not be a tough one to
I'm just asking
bet
you.
on.
I'm just asking you.
I would say they stand a pretty good chance.
Okay.
I would say.
The race is on, right?
Well, yeah. I thought you were going to say, would there be any chance of there being more grass carp than common carp? Now, that would be a scary thought.
Oh,
Could you
that'd be hard.
imagine?
No, that won't happen
Can you
because
imagine?
they'll devastate everything. If there's that many numbers, then everything will be decimated, and then the common carp will be done too, and everything else will be. So,
Yeah, the common carp would
all going to
not
die.
survive that.
If there's
either.
that many Asian carp in the Great Lakes, we are toast. Toast.
Wow, that's a scary thought. Anyways, I urge everybody to go to asiancarp.ca. That's asiancarp.ca. Download all the information there, mostly stuff that'll help you identify the fish, but also what to do in the event that you do encounter one of these critters in the wild. And be on the lookout. We need to be vigilante about this. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
This is the one time you can be a vigilante. I like that.
I like that, too. What's in the news, Mr. Bowman?
Well, this is a weird one that our crack research team has pulled up, but the world-renowned, is that world-renowned? Yeah, I guess.
Oh, yeah, he's huge.
He's the biggest rap star named Aubrey Graham, a.k.a. Drake.
Oh, Drake. Okay, I've heard. I was going to say, that's not the story I got in front of me, but all right, you got to go with
he's
it.
donned on one of an American fly fishing magazine. He made the cover of the American fly fishing magazine.
How's that?
They have him fly fishing. The best part about this whole thing.
Should I be asking
is that-
Dean, by the way? Or
We could ask Dean this for
You can
sure.
ask me. Yeah, this is kind of out of what we would normally talk about, but this was in like national or like like mainstream news everywhere. People talking about this.
Drake, of course.
And the fly fishing community was not happy about this.
Oh.
Like there was a lot of pushback.
Remember we were talking about Ladybug? He was on the cover. Apparently, he's dressed
Yeah, if
in
you
a
look
Ladybug
behind you,
pattern.
his outfit and the cover are
there.
there.
What the hell is that?
Yeah.
The Drake. Look at
So the
that.
magazine's called The Drake.
Boy, does he ever look like a fly fisherman there?
Yeah, this is the issue I'm having with it. We have a hard enough time, anyways. We don't need him on there, but.
Okay, well, tell me about it. What's he doing? Was this a publicity
This is just a
stunt?
publicity stunt for the magazine to get some traction, which, I mean, he has millions and millions of followers, and he reposted it saying that he's now into this. So they basically just staged him there.
That's even a horrible picture. The setting,
right.
the whole nine
Yeah.
yards is horrible.
I
Everything
have
about
to
it's
ask
horrible.
you a question.
Okay.
Is there any chance that we can get the, I'm going to call the publicity agent or whoever was in charge of putting this together
Yep.
and getting Drake to appear on this magazine? Whoever that person is, I would like to hire him and bring him on to this show. Because my question is, why the hell don't we have Drake doing that kind of crap here on this show?
Because we're not called The Drake.
Also,
We have
it's
a bad
the
title.
name.
If someone had the name Outdoor Journal, we could get them on.
Oh.
ODJ. Well, let's look for some star with ODJ as the
Yeah.
as
Then
their
they come
initials. Then we can get them on because that's.
No, but why would Drake even do that?
That's the
I don't
question.
know.
That is the question of all
So this
questions.
ladybug coat outfit that he has on is a Nike product. Maybe they wanted him to go promote the ladybug coat.
No, that's a real product.
I mean, yeah, everything
Look
in
at
the
the hood on
magazine
that
was
thing,
him
too.
in this
Look at
ladybug
this
coat.
hood set up here.
That can't be a real product that people would actually go out and spend
I'm
their hard-earned
I'm
money
looking
on.
at buying one actually for the next for next year.
Dean's gonna be on camera with that and the ladybugger. We're gonna call him the ladybugger. I love it. I wonder is the color off too, because it should be red, shouldn't it? Isn't
Yeah,
it?
I
Are
don't-
ladybugs red?
Those
a rule?
Are those orange ones invasive?
Those are not ladybugs,
Yeah.
right? They're invasive. It's an imitation.
He's an imitation of what his
Well,
environment.
it's an imitation of the drake, right?
Invading another
The
environment.
drake versus drake, and versus isn't there a fly with the
Any
in the-
mayfly they call it drake. pretty
drake
much,
from
yeah.
mayfly? There you go.
Yeah.
And then the feathers, use feathers from drake birds to tie your flies. Is that possible?
Yep.
And
That's how the term
it's
started.
all drake,
Yeah.
bud. It's all about the drake.
Alrighty, let's get on with this program, shall we? Is there anything more about this story that we
No,
need to know,
that's-
or
that's
we
all we
wasted
have.
We went
enough of-
way overboard on that
enough-
sucker.
Enough of our valuable time here. First of all, I'm not interested in Drake, nor am I interested in fly fishing magazines.
How about
So,
rap music? You
There
interested
you
in
go.
rap music?
Add that to make it a threesome, a perfect threesome. I am interested, though, in the folks at fishfindermounts.com, because this is the fan question of the week, brought to you by said fishfindermounts.com. That's fishfindermounts.com. You know, if you are an aficionado of electronics and technology on your boat, and you have not gone to this website, I don't
on
even
you.
know. I don't even know how you can be in the fish finding business.
Yeah,
Like
you
hang
got to
it.
check it. You have to check it.
You have to
for
check it
sure.
out. It's called fishfindermounts.com. They have everything that you could ever want to mount, use, operate technology on your boat. And it's not just limited to live scope. It's not just limited to any of these other products that we talk about from Garmin, for example, on a regular basis. They have mounts for any brand and or size and or shape of electronics.
Oh yeah.
And they make using those electronics an absolute.
We need to send them. We need
pleasure.
to send them some video or something. We've done some pieces this year that are coming up on our show. So after that, they could put it in their site somewhere, embed it in their site somewhere. You
There's
know what
my
I mean?
favorite piece right there.
Yeah, you do like that one, don't you?
Oh my god! Oh my god!
That's a dandy.
So you just
That handle
pull and push, and that thing twists and turns, and then the handle up top, you turn it, and it changes direction of the transducer. I'm telling you, it's just unbelievable.
That is a convenient unit, I have to say. That
It's
is.
unbelievable. I told
compared
you, a buddy of mine, he's got, I don't know where I got it, obviously from one of our programs and or someplace, an overhead view of our boat from this past season. And he called, he says, "What the hell are you guys doing? Are you electroshocking those fish now?" He says, "That's not even legal." When he saw all this stuff on the
I
boat.
love it. Yeah, could you look at that? You see that all above and all the gear we got hanging off. Yeah, I could see that.
Anyways, Fed question of the week brought to you by fishfindermounts.com. That's fishfindermounts.com, all one word, of course. It's submitted by Simon from Ontario via email, but you can access it through many different ways, Mr. Bowman.
The email address is info@fishingcanada.com or Facebook or Instagram. I'm sure they could find another, if there was somehow a YouTuber that, they have a YouTube feedback, we could throw it through that even
Sure
if we
we
had
could.
to. So
Sure we
it
could.
doesn't matter. But this is from Simon. Any advice? It's a good one. It's different for sure. But any advice for people who live in an area where there are minimal lakes and rivers around? What's ways to stay motivated? How do they stay motivated when they don't have a whole lot of opportunities
Holy
close
moly.
by? That's a tough one, right?
That is a great question.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious one is you maybe invest in some specialty channels like Sportsman Channel Canada or WFN. You could have some extra TV stuff to do it. And obviously, staying in that vein, your YouTube and all that kind of stuff. So it keeps you interested in that sense. But, it's,
I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to think of some place that we have been to that does not have some kind of flowing water
Yeah, in Canada, you'd be hard pressed to find a place.
Dean, where would you find something like maybe northern Alberta? Maybe I'm
Saskatchewan, probably.
Even
There's probably
that.
some areas in Saskatchewan where there's not a
think?
lot of
Maybe in the prairies down at the bottom end of the
thinking.
province, because I know in the northern end of the province it's all water. So maybe the prairies. But I know
Like
in
if you go like Quebec, Ontario,
Manitoba,
like it's unreal.
The
how much water we
Maritimes. I
have.
mean, we just came from the Maritimes a few weeks ago. You couldn't drive more than 5 minutes without seeing water.
Yeah.
But anyways, I guess it's a legitimate question. But I just
How to stay motivated? What ways to stay motivated? It depends on how much you want to fish.
Listen to the Outdoor Journal Radio podcast
Come
on a
on
regular
now.
basis, because we do talk about fishing. We're going to talk about fish coming up a little later on here today too. But we do talk about fishing. I think the best way to stay motivated, to be honest with you, is watch the fishing shows, man.
That's what I said earlier. Yeah. And I mean, it depends on how far away too. Like to us, to me, let's just say the norm. My normal drive on a weekend fishing is an hour and a half drive. Right. That's what I've choose, and I got closer than that around. I choose to go north and I go east a lot.
Because you don't
know
like
what I mean?
Scugog, that's why.
Well, Scugog, but I got Rice Lake right there, which is really close, and I'm going to make a point of trying to fish it a little more and more. But I like the whole drive process and everything like that. So if it's 2 or 3 hours, then I could say that's a long
Maybe
way.
Simon doesn't drive.
Right.
Right?
That's
Maybe
very
Simon
possible.
is a
possible.
youngster that doesn't drive, or maybe somebody a little more advanced in life that doesn't drive. So let's
can't
make
trailer a boat, can't do all
Right.
that stuff. So there's only bank fishing and there's all kinds of.
Well, if you have the internet, which you must have because you sent this via info@fishingcanada.com, so you have access to the internet, I would suggest that you go to, I don't know, maybe there's 10,000 fishing videos available at any given time.
There's a lot.
On YouTube.
There's a lot.
And try and, I know it's funny, it's you say that because I talk to a lot of people, mostly middle-aged adults, who say that Saturday mornings, it's a ritual. Saturday mornings from 7 o'clock till whatever time they have to stop. All they do is watch fishing shows, and that's how they get their fix. So, maybe that's. I don't know. All I'm saying is it's if sometimes when you have no other alternatives, that's the way you have to go.
And by the way, everybody, we got to remember one of our sponsors, Sail, home for all things fishing, including rods, tackle, clothing, and much more. Head over to Sail at the store or to sail.ca. Save up to 60%. Usually, they're sending constant emails to us that are save. So there's always stuff on special.
What a perfect time of year to be.
Oh my God!
Going through either the website or a store, they have everything that you could possibly imagine.
You're going to be bundling up very soon. So if you're listening to this podcast as it's released in November-ish, so you're going to want to be bundling up, and they do carry a great line of clothing there. So
that's Sail, SAIL, and if you don't have one in your neighborhood, which is quite likely, go to sail.ca. That's sail.ca. And I believe right now, I could be wrong, you could get up to 60% off on some select items. There you go.
You was right.
One thing they do not sell is fresh fish, and that's what we're going to.
Well, they sell the gear that you can catch fresh fish. But,
avoid all these problems. Catch your own fish.
Yeah.
Joining us now from Ambrose University in Calgary is Matthew Morris, who's been doing an interesting study. He's a biologist that's interested in ecology and the evolution of fish.
My kind of guy, eh? Our kind of guy right there.
Yeah.
For sure.
We originally broke this type of story more on a national level several years ago on the Outdoor Journal radio show on the Fan 590. And it was shocking at the time. We had a subsequent program came up about a year later. It was shocking to all of us that consume fish on a regular basis that, in fact, a lot of the labeling that we trust and care about when we're reading a package may not be as it's stated. And to help us through that, Matthew, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. How long have you been working on this, by the way?
Oh, man. So, this started back in my undergrad in a molecular ecology class at Dalhousie. So that's coming on 20 years ago now. We did some of this. And
that was it.
I brought it with me to Calgary. So since 2014, we've been sampling various markets in Calgary and looking for evidence of mislabeling, and it turns out it wasn't hard to find.
It was shocking. So then I'm going to make an assumption, because back then, it would have been between 15 and 20 years ago that we first broke this story. Back then, we all assumed that this was just a temporary little glitch in the global system of packaging fresh fish. Clearly, if it's still going on today, it wasn't a little blip. So nothing has happened since that.
That's what I was going to say. If you did an interview 10 years ago, he's been at it for this long, and it's still happening, as we're going to find out from Matthew here in a second. Obviously, somebody is not taking care of business here properly, right? So there's
it's
a problem.
Big global problem,
Yeah.
and it is big bucks. Yeah, there's still charges being leveled in the last year or so. Big charges out of Mississippi. There's a company in BC that was charged for bringing critically endangered European eel into Canada. What's that? 2-3 years ago now. So this is an ongoing concern for sure.
So first of all, before we get into the ins and outs of it, just give us a bird's eye view of what exactly are we talking about here when we say mislabeling of fresh fish?
Yeah, so we're talking about having labels on your food that is accurate, right? So that the consumer knows exactly what they're purchasing. So we have these labels. Maybe it says it's salmon, or it says it's rainbow trout, or it says it's tuna. You as the consumer have some faith that what you're purchasing is in fact as represented on that label. So the Canadian Food Inspection Agency has a series of regulations to ensure that consumers aren't hoodwinked, as it were, right? So you bought what you got, right? So they run what's called the fish list, and that fish list contains all the different species of marine and freshwater fish that are legally sold in Canada, and all the varied names that they can legally have. So you guys are in Ontario, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
You talk about walleye all the time. I'm out here in Alberta. It took me a while to understand when people were talking about pickerel out here that they're actually talking about walleye, right?
That, by the way, is not the mislabeling we're talking about.
No. So the Canadian Food Inspection Agency recognizes that. You look to their fish list, and walleye and pickerel are both legally acceptable terms for walleye when you're at the grocery store.
Let's talk about that fish first of all, and the only reason I say that is because I'd say over the last couple of months, for the first time in my life, I've actually been purchasing walleye at the store. I wanted to try it. I said, I got to try it. If it doesn't taste good, then I'll go back to just using walleye that we catch and take home. So I've been trying it, and I got to tell you, it's been really good. Now, the advantage to me doing it, and most people probably listening to this program right now, is that we can identify a walleye fillet from a cod or a tilapia or some of the other fish that are on the market. So we can look at it and we can say that's definitely a walleye fillet. Right?
We've filleted enough of them in our life that we know exactly what they look like.
But the general public would not be in that position. And that's what's worrisome here, is that...
when you buy it, sorry to interrupt, is there skin on? No, so it's skin.
But it's still very identifiable.
No, I know, but that's one way they can unidentify a fish easier, right?
To you and me.
Yeah.
But to the average person who doesn't fish, what's the difference?
Because even a scaled walleye, we could tell it was a walleye skin. You pretty much can tell, but wow, interesting.
So this is the issue, right? Is that you're buying these products usually not head-on fish. They often have been stripped of a lot of their identifying features, and so you kind of just trust that this thing at the sushi store, they're calling it snapper, you're trusting it's some kind of snapper, but actually you're eating tilapia and you have no idea that you've just bought a cheap product.
That's a bunch of bullshit they're giving, eh, Dean?
Once again, I have to go back to what I just said. Some of us, and I'm assuming most of us listening to this program, could probably identify tilapia versus cod. But the general public at large has no idea.
Oh, God, no.
So
without a doubt.
So then let's go back to the very start of the process. So let's say that we're talking tilapia. wherever it's farmed, whether it's coming out of Mexico or South America or wherever the product is coming from. We always assumed, until this story broke some 15 plus years ago, that on location, wherever that tilapia farm is that we have an inspection system in place when the packaging is done, that somebody who has the authority to certify a product is there looking at it and says, yeah, this is tilapia, it came from that body of water, it's skinned now, and I see it in the package. Okay, stamp, yeah, certified. That's tilapia, send it up to Canada. That's not the case.
Not entirely, no.
It could be because the guys that are receiving it could then mislabel it, could they not? The people that are buying it, they buy it at a nice cheap tilapia price, and then they say, okay, let's put this at a snapper price now.
I don't know, because if I remember the story correctly, a lot of this labeling was being done right at the source, especially ocean fish that are processed right on the water in those big processing ships that catch and clean, package, freeze, and ship to distributors. Yeah. That's where, at the time, most of the problem was occurring, is on those big packaging ships.
So they've certainly looked into this to try to figure out where's the mislabeling occurring. So part of the problem is just the vast international scope of fisheries, right? You get a tuna down in the South Pacific, and it's going to go through numerous countries before it ever makes it to table in Canada. And each of those countries could have completely different labeling laws. And so part of the issue could simply be that it was labeled in one place according to those regulations, and then it was brought to Canada where the labeling laws are different, and it didn't get caught in the process. But it could also be perfectly illegal, intentional fraud. We have all those issues, and we know it's happening everywhere, from the point of like where the fish are being caught to where they're landing at the shore, to where they're being processed, to the warehouse, to the grocery store. We're finding it everywhere along that system.
One of the alarming things about this when it first broke, because my thing was, well, okay, so if you and your group has found some mislabeled product, so you should be able to follow it back and go through the whole process and find out exactly who mislabeled it, when and where. But that's not the case, is it? That's not the case. There's no way to track where this food is coming from, where this fish is coming from. And that's the biggest problem of all.
Yeah, Canada's recently tightened some of its traceability regulations. So they now require that where a fish lands, there needs to be records of where it came one step before and where it's going one step after. But that's currently it for our traceability regulations. The dream is to have a sort of boat to table traceability where that fish gets like an RFID tag, and that passes through various checkpoints, and they scan it, and then eventually it gets a little QR code, and when it gets to your table, you scan the QR code and you can see exactly where it's been.
Well, that's
great. I mean,
we laugh, but some of the other
unfortunate, but you have to have
sources of protein, it's exactly what happens. In the meat industry, poultry, pork, it's pretty highly regulated right from the time it's harvested to the time it hits your table. But fish, which we all assumed would be, is not.
Matthew, you said to the grocery store. Has there ever been any grocery stores that have been proven to be doing this themselves? And it finally gets to that point, the grocery store, has that ever been proven?
I'm not aware of any grocery stores in Canada that have been slapped with any sort of lawsuit.
Okay.
A lot of the time it's happening with the distributors, the ones who are selling it to those vendors. Like this happened, I think I just mentioned in Mississippi recently, a decades-long case involving intentional fraud where they were passing off fish as locally caught, and they weren't. And so the restaurants there and the distributor were both fined substantially. But in Canada, I'm not aware of any major grocery market chain.
Well, I'll tell you, the walleye that I've been, or pickerel for some of you, that I've been eating recently, that I'm purchasing at a retail operation.
It's catfish.
Well, no, it's walleye. But there is an interesting stamp on it, and it says wild caught. And I would think that even that, because we all love the notion that we're consuming wild food that's harvested in the wild, and it's not raised inappropriately, and it's not, it doesn't have chemicals enhancing its growth and all that. So when we see wild on a package, like we get all excited, right? Of course. How bad is that misleading little piece of information?
Yeah, every time there's a label, there's the opportunity for fraud, right?
Wow.
And the problem is that, especially with labels like wild or farmed, you see that for salmon a lot, or wild caught salmon versus farmed salmon. Mm-hmm. They're genetically indistinguishable. So we have to use genetic markers often, especially when it's a fillet, right? When it's identifying features that have been stripped, we have to use genetic markers to figure out what the species is. So we use what's called a DNA barcode, which is this region of DNA that's been determined to sort of mutate at a certain rate. It's not this gene isn't so important that all species are virtually identical at this gene. Any mutation would just sort of kill you because it's so vital for life. But nor is it so non-vital that everyone is completely different from everybody else. Any mutation just sort of accumulates. So it's in that sort of Goldilocks sweet spot where you can extract this bit of DNA and sequence it and determine the exact species. But farmed and wild are they're so closely related, right? That this particular marker is not it's not suitable to determine if that salmon is farmed or not. You can figure out if it's Atlantic salmon or if it's sockeye salmon using this marker. Wow. But you can't figure out if it's farmed or wild Atlantic salmon.
So in the DNA of a fish, this might be this might be the dumbest question ever, but a wild salmon would be eating wild food, and a farmed salmon, I'm assuming, you eat pellets and stuff like that. So the DNA would never show something like that in the markering.
No, that's not the utility of DNA, unfortunately. Right. You can use other things like stable isotope analysis. You can look at the sort of markers from the foods that they eat and how that gets incorporated into the tissue.
Okay.
So that could be a particular, but it's expensive and not nearly as straightforward as doing some sort of basic DNA barcoding. So DNA barcoding is kind of the standard for identifying fish fraud, but it's not great in certain situations like farmed and wild. So I'm not really sure the extent to which consumers are being ripped off with those particular labels. Hopefully not much.
How do you do bark, or how do you DNA test a fish in layman's terms?
Yeah, well, you take the tissue and then typically it goes into a little stabilizing solution where the DNA is all nice and happy. And then you have to break open the cell, right? Because DNA is trapped inside of these little membranes of fat. So the cell membrane and then the nuclear membrane. So you have to break that all open, get rid of all the contaminants. There's another molecule kind of like DNA called RNA that you have to get rid of as well. And then basically you have all this DNA. It's giant amounts of DNA in every single cell, right? Like humans, every one of our cells has 6 billion little letters of DNA in it. So you need to target your one specific region. So we do that with these little, they're called primers. They're little bits of DNA that find your gene of interest and bind to it, and then they can start building off of it. DNA is double-stranded, and each strand is a complement. So if there's a letter A here, then there's a letter T here. So what you do is you separate the DNA, stick your little primer on, and then it starts laying the complement to what's on this strand. And then once you have a lot of that, you can run it through essentially a DNA sequencer that can tell you the exact letters of that little region you've just targeted. So for us, it's about 500 letters long, this DNA barcode, series of A's, C's, T's, and G's. And it gives you the resolution you need to determine many species. It's not great for tuna. It can sort of get you down to a few tuna, but it can't give you the exact species of tuna under most circumstances. But it's really good for salmon. It's good for snapper. It's good for cod. You can tell Atlantic from Pacific cod with this marker.
Wow.
And so with all of that technology, yourself, along with the Mount Royal University and University of Calgary, have determined that roughly 1 out of 5 packages of fish in Calgary, and we're making assumptions that that is widespread because we know it is, 1 out of 5 packages of seafood is mislabeled. 1/5. So chances are real good that if you eat fish and purchase it at a retailer shelf, chances are real good over the course of, say, a year, that you've been
bought
eating
and-
something
yeah.
that was not
As
labeled
advertised.
correctly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And our study was the first of its kind for a prairie region. We weren't sure sort of what to expect for a place that's far from the ocean. Would we be in line with mislabeling rates in Vancouver or Halifax? And turns out we were right in line, if not a little bit lower than what we find in coastal cities. And ours was the first of its kind to study invertebrates in any real way in Canada. So we found 1 in 5 both for invertebrates. That's your shellfish, right? Your prawns and shrimp and oysters and octopus, and 1 in 5 for finfish.
1 in 5. See, that's hard. The obvious reason for doing this is financial gain, because we mentioned the wild caught versus the farm fish has a perception that it's more valuable. You can consume it more readily. You can pay a little more for it because, after all, it's wild caught. And why wouldn't you spend a couple of more bucks? So I can understand that part. But some of the stuff I don't quite understand why they would be labeling it something that it wasn't. So maybe you can shed some light on that. What's the reason? Maybe just they have a higher supply of this fish and they have a higher demand of this fish. So hell, we'll just turn this fish into that fish. Is that kind of as simple as that?
Oh yeah, there's certainly a couple different reasons, and one is definitely financial gain. That's just across the spectrum in Canada and around the world. One of the leading drivers of this is simply financial gain. You're just being ripped off. This is why virtually anywhere from like 95 to 100% of snapper, depending on the study, is just not. It's not snapper. It's either tilapia in the majority of cases, so that seems to be intentional fraud. Tilapia being a relatively cheap aquaculture freshwater fish, right? You pack these things into tanks because they can tolerate low oxygen, herbivores, right? And substitute that out for a wild marine carnivorous fish. You're paying top dollar for a pretty cheap product, right? Sometimes though, it's just because the vendor doesn't really know what they're doing. So some of the rockfish, it's a type of rockfish or it's a type of snapper. It's just not the kind that can be sold as red snapper. There's so many different species of snapper and rockfish, and even for the expert, they can be bewildering. So you get something it's got a label on it for snappers. Let's just sell that as red snapper, right? They don't think anything of it. So some of it's pure, accident. And actually there's the occasional time where it's actually the vendor who's getting ripped off. They're selling something for cheap when they shouldn't, because they just didn't understand what they actually had. Right. And sometimes it has to do with, as I said, these international labeling regulations. One of the things we're finding in Calgary, and I wasn't aware of this until we started looking out here, is that a lot of our salmon, if it's sold as salmon, it's supposed to be Atlantic salmon. That's the only thing salmon can be, according to the CFIA. If it's sockeye salmon, it has to be labeled as such. Any Pacific salmon needs to be given a designator. Salmon has to be Atlantic salmon.
Oh, interesting.
There we go again with the Atlantic.
Right, yeah. But in Calgary, a bunch of our Atlantic salmon are actually rainbow trout.
Wow.
Which is totally bizarre. Like, you've cut open your fair share of rainbows. They don't look like Atlantic salmon on the inside.
Not at all.
But to most people, like I said before, they wouldn't know the difference. And in terms of table fare, it's probably as good, if not in some cases even better.
And they'd have to sell it staked or filleted, obviously, right?
That's right.
They'd have to do
That's
it that
right.
way.
And they're manipulating the diet so that they take on that
orange,
sort of,
right?
Exactly, right? So you feed them the carotenoids that'll change their flesh, that color. So this happened in China, big issue. Most of their salmon being sold in China was rainbow trout. So the government's response was to simply change the legal name for salmon. So now they can legally be sold as rainbow trout in China. And then if they're doing a lot of rainbow trout aquaculture, that's getting imported into Canada with that salmon label. So in cases like that, I'm not sure that that's intentional malfeasance. That's one of those issues of sort of countries getting their wires crossed over labels and just not really checking. But it's certainly ending up in our stores and on our plates.
If they're doing that, are there any potential health hazards coming down the road? I mean, if mislabeling is happening just because of value and quantity, the abundance of a particular stock, is it possible that fish that are tainted or maybe past best before dates are mislabeled as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure about those being passed with best before dates. Definitely fish that are less marketable will get sold as under a more pleasing name. So
Right.
one of the health effects that we've seen certainly are things like Escolar or butterfish being sold under the label White Tuna. White Tuna is not a legal name for anything in Canada, but you often see that as a sort of designator for certain species of tuna. So you buy we had a student go to an all-you-can-eat sushi restaurant and purchase what was called white tuna, and it came out as Escolar.
What is that?
Sometimes it's called oil fish. Oh, Escolar is a nasty little fish. If you cook it right, it's pretty good. But it produces by weight something like 20% of its body weight is an indigestible fatty acid, and it leads to certain gastrointestinal distress. If you eat enough of it, you could land in the hospital.
Really? And and it was raw when he bought it. Like you got the sushi. It was raw, or was it cooked?
Good question. I'm not sure about. It was just a sushi fillet, so however they process that, it doesn't really matter in that case. Yeah, because this fatty acid is definitely. So it leads to something. I'm going to get the name wrong here, so I wrote it down. Carioria. It's like this form of diarrhea that you get from this particular fish because you're just like dumping literally wax out of your body, right? You get heart palpitations and all sorts of funky things that can happen here, right? So if somebody has a ton of this fish and they're having a hard time getting rid of it, perhaps one of the solutions is to sell it as white tuna, but we're not entirely sure why this is a fairly common phenomenon in Calgary, and we know of it all over North America.
What do you do to test? We know how you test for DNA, but in terms of getting your samples, are you just going to these grocery stores and buying them off the shelf?
Yeah, we sent our undergrads and graduate students from our 3 different institutions, just said, go on out. We gave them these little vials that preserve the tissue. And in some cases, depending on the year, we could give them a little bit of money to help offset cost. And just go have some sushi with your friends and grab a bit of it about the size of a kidney bean and stick it into the vial. Take a picture of the samples, take a picture of the label, take a picture of the sample in the vial, right? So you got that sort of tracking of the sample, and then send it back. And so that's what they did. And it's just shocking how easy it was for them to find examples of mislabeled products in Calgary. And not just like rainbow trout being sold as salmon or your classic snapper, but like really weird things like this deep sea eel, a punctuated snake eel, was being sold on the Calgary market as I think it was called saltwater or seawater eel. So you assume it's American eel, and it absolutely was not. It's a species not on the CFIA fish list at all for sale in Calgary. And they weren't even trying, right? It's not like there was this giant, robust sampling design. They just went out into the markets and just grabbed what was available. And there's this weird species right there, right?
Wow.
That's interesting. I was going to ask you when you were talking, was it Escolar? Is that the name you just said?
Yeah.
Is there any market in the world for eating Escolar? Is it off?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? So as toxic as it can be, then there's a way of eating it or preparing it or selling it or something?
There is a way, and you can find blogs on how to prepare it without doing too much damage to yourself. And I think the moderation is key for that particular species, right? And just sort of be prepared for possible consequences.
How about fish that are protected and on the endangered species list? For example, one that comes to mind is orange roughy, which used to be very popular, and then all of a sudden it was deemed to be in peril and it sort of went off the market. Are there maybe some intentional frauds being committed there with Chilean sea bass is another one that comes to mind. That if we label it something else, we can still sell it, but we're illegally catching a fish that's on the do not catch list. That would be a concern as well, right?
Yeah, conservation is definitely a big issue with fish mislabeling. And we found particularly in our invertebrates some crab that were protected species of fish. And so these are crab, you don't get the claws and stuff on it. You're aware of artificial crab that's actually that fish, right? So yeah, we definitely had that. No Chilean sea bass or orange roughy, thankfully, but still some species that sort of eyebrow raising that are globally listed by the IUCN, the International, let me get this right, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, right, as species that are vulnerable or endangered. Definitely found on the Calgary market. Now, some of it is, there were examples of Atlantic cod, which, as you guys are aware, are not doing terribly well. They were being sold as Pacific cod, which are doing substantially better. So you, as the consumer, you're trying to make an informed decision here. Right. You got these two labels in front of you. Which one am I going to buy? Well, let's go for the Pacific cod that are being better managed. And then he ended up eating an Atlantic cod anyways. So this definitely happened in our case.
So just getting back to the Atlantic cod for a minute. So you're saying that there is a viable industry going on the East Coast of North America, catching Atlantic cod and packaging it as Pacific cod, so that the consumer is not aware that they're actually eating a fish that has been on the do not fish.
Somebody's doing that. Fish. Might not be there, but somebody's doing that along the line. Yeah, they're catching.
That's right.
But see, to me, like, I listened to that and I said, well, how the hell did they get away with it? I mean, we've got so many rules and regulations and so many levels of management in our food industry. How the hell do you catch an Atlantic cod and then package it as a Pacific? Somebody who's the first, let's call it distributor, the distributor who first gets that product, are you saying that they have absolutely no awareness that this could be an Atlantic cod versus, I mean, they'd have to know the differences.
Yeah.
When you're purchasing
it's really challenging to know in every particular case, where is this happening and for what reason? So we can speculate, particularly in the tilapia snapper situation. Right. With cod, there's legal ambiguity in what cod can be named. So you can call Atlantic cod, they could be sold as Atlantic cod or just cod. And it's the same for Pacific cod. They could legally be called Pacific cod or just cod. So you can imagine a situation, right, where you have some Atlantic cod is caught, it's labeled as cod, shipped over to Alberta, and then the vendor there just assumes it's Pacific because that's the side of the country we're on, and then changes the label to Pacific. So it may not be intentional. It's really hard to say exactly what's going on there. But this legal ambiguity is a real issue. In fostering mislabeling and in hiding species of conservation concern. So it's not just the mislabeling itself, but also this legal ambiguity in our naming practices.
These guys that are getting, you said there's some big lawsuits out there. They're getting charged. What's any idea of the money charges? Is it anywhere close? Are these guys just paying it off saying, piss, that's nothing. You know what I mean? We're making so much money. And it's not a fine of millions of dollars, obviously, or something like that, because they're still doing it, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's sort of slap on the wrist, but the one in Mississippi, I think, was actually pretty substantial. But yeah, I couldn't quote that off the top of my head. Maybe your viewers can take a look at that one.
Staying right with it. They're just saying, okay, that's just like a speeding ticket. Oh, good, I got that one. I'll speed.
You know what shocks me more about this than anything else, and it did when I first heard this story over a decade ago. We know how anal DFO is in terms of sport fishery, right? The regulations that they have, for example, bluefin tuna. We personally experienced a couple of occasions where we saw firsthand how tightly regulated that fishery is.
We thought we were going to die.
We thought we were going to jail. And we didn't even break the law. We didn't even break the law. I find it hard to believe that, government agencies like DFO isn't on top of this. like.
Yeah, when you see
I don't get
where they
it.
protected those tuna. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's just
Well, when you think about the sheer volume of fish that we eat in Canada and how much of this fish is getting imported from elsewhere, the numbers are enormous, and it's the Canadian Food Inspection Agency that is in charge of enforcing these regulations. And they have to do that not just for our seafood, but for all foods, right? So they're testing honey, and they're testing horse meat in the Quebec market, and all these crazy areas of fraud, and they're understaffed. They're just, I mean, I certainly don't want to put blame on hard government workers who are trying their best to do their job. They're just, it's a lot of different points of entry,
right,
and it's a lot of different food products. And when you have a fish that has been stripped of a lot of its identifying features overseas, DNA barcoding is not cheap, and so to expect that can happen for every item that comes across our border it's just virtually impossible.
I was always under the impression when you see these big ocean trawlers that are harvesting fish and processing it right on board. I always was under the impression, I was told, that they had to have an inspector on board at all times, and that inspector was there on behalf of the jurisdiction that represented the area that these fish were caught in. That inspector was there to keep everybody honest. Mm-hmm. And so I dumb it down, right?
But it could still be honest in that point. At that point, that's the first point. It just as it moves on to here is where the dishonesty can happen, right? You buy that shit for cheap. You buy that tilapia for cheap, let's just say, and then all of a sudden, it ain't no tilapia. I'm going to sell it for something else. So there's so many different points along the line. It sounds like
that's
to me.
right. So and so many different countries where the fish are being caught as well that might not have the same sorts of tight regulations, right?
So it could be more of a case of repackaging.
Exactly.
Rather than packaging.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
The other thing about the DFO, going back, I think they're understaffed as well, but I think the DFO are doing a good job at the point of capture. You know what I mean? Like the tuna thing. I think when they had the herring boats all out there, they're there and they're watching and they're making sure. Right. So these guys are bringing in, this tons of herring or tons of whatever. And then all of a sudden after that, who knows where it goes and how it gets changed over, right? So.
Yeah, even Canada caught fish might be shipped to another country to be processed before it ever makes it back to our tables, right?
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for us, the consumers? I mean, people who don't eat fish, obviously this is doesn't affect them one way or another. But for people who consume fish regularly, what does this mean to us?
Yeah, well, it's definitely, for those who are eating fish, right, it's hurting your wallet. Especially now when grocery prices are so high. You are paying premium dollar for inferior product, and that's just happening across the board, particularly in sushi. So if you love your snapper, just know you're not eating it.
Chances are 1 out of 5 you're eating something else totally different.
Yeah, it definitely has those health impacts that you had brought up earlier. Right. So not just Escolar, but as you know, there's methylmercury concentration in certain top carnivores. So you may be trying to avoid those particular fish, but you're eating them anyways without realizing it. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency, on their fish list, they also put little environmental warnings for certain fish, like burbot. They say you may not want to eat them because they may be bringing environmental toxins. And so, okay, I'm going to avoid that fish, and then perhaps you end up eating it anyways, right?
So there's no study.
Dean loves burbot.
Yeah, I know. So we don't have. See, I'm very naive when it comes to labels, right? I'm making an assumption that if I purchase a package of fish, somebody has taken the trouble to test it to see that it's not contaminated with something, right? No? You're laughing at me. Don't laugh at me. It makes me feel terrible.
Oh no, I'm sorry. There's so much product out there that to test everything, and again, from every point of entry it's not going to be feasible. Even just to put this in perspective, the CFI has been doing mislabeling work, like they've been sequencing some fish. Our study in Calgary using undergrads sampled well over 100 more than the CFIA has done in the last several years, right? Wow. So the testing's just not really there.
Wow, that's so unfortunate.
That blows my
for us,
mind.
You know.
Yeah,
Wonder if it's
so
going
it-
on in the meat world too. Like how much of it is going on? I'm sure it's going on, but in the other meats, I know like fish is so broad. There's so many fishes that you can use.
so is meat.
But
So
yeah,
is-
you could. I bet you we're not getting all the steaks that we're thinking that we're getting.
Well,
and all
at
that,
the time
you know what I mean?
that we did this story originally, Sean Kelly
Right.
was with us, and I remember him commenting on this, saying that this could never happen in the meat industry, and he went on to tell us why, because there's so many steps from the farm to the table that there's so many checkpoints. He said it could never happen. It would be impossible to happen in the meat industry. So
Well, there was
don't-
just a few years ago that my comment about horse meat in Quebec wasn't facetious. This was found, right?
Oh, okay,
Right.
but I remember that story too. But that's horse meat in a very isolated part of the country, and it's not beef and chicken and all that stuff. I would be shocked if that industry was regulated at all. To be honest with you, it's so small. But
I do recall something recently about ground meats having a mix of species in them.
There you see, that's an easy
but
one.
yeah,
to
I
get.
couldn't give you details on that. I just recall that on my newsfeed recently.
I mean, we've grown up thinking about hot dogs being nothing more than scraps that they left on the ground after all the butchering was done and the grinding was done, and you got a
Right.
little bit of everything in there, including beaks and feet and everything else. We jokingly sort of accept that, but it's probably not that far from being real.
Oh
you know,
yeah,
when you
I
think about
that's
it.
pretty real. That one.
But you are right. We do care a lot more about our birds, right? We go to
Yeah.
a restaurant. We want a chicken Caesar wrap. We don't ask for a bird Caesar wrap.
No.
And we want our hamburger, and we know if it's a bison burger or if it's
Right.
coming from
Angus
cow.
or whatever.
But-
yeah.
Yeah, but we seem totally comfortable ordering fish and chips.
Yeah, that's the one that gets me, because you go into a good fish and chip place and they have various categories of investment that it'll take from you to have a good meal. So they've got the cheap fish and then the middle
Haddock
level.
and then the halibut
But if you
and-
want the really good stuff, that's going to cost you $25 a slab. And I often wondered, how do I even
There's
know?
no difference.
How do I even know? It could be all, now that you tell me this, it could all come in as the same
Oh, yeah.
product.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah.
the, and
So
the
cut it a little
retailer,
differently, and
and
yeah.
the retailer is the one who's making that decision, because this is not packaged goods, right?
Yeah.
So you don't know
Yeah.
when he's putting in your $25 piece of halibut if he didn't take it from the paddock or cod place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
knows?
Absolutely.
Oh, there's a fascinating history with fish and chips, and that the species being predominantly cod originally in fish and chip products.
Right.
And then we fished that out and then moved on to another species and another species, all being sold as fish and chips. And the consumer just has no idea that these species have been unsustainably harvested, and we've had to substitute one species for another over the years.
Except at Kennedy's.
Kennedy's
in London.
In London,
That's
they had
real
cod.
fish.
They told us it was cod, and we
Yes.
paid extra for that cod.
Oh, boy, it was
We don't
good.
know what the hell else it was.
I don't know what it was, but it was good.
You know who's got the upper hand on all of this?
Who's that?
That guy sitting right there called Boba, because he doesn't
Yeah.
eat meat. Boba's a vegetarian.
Or fish. He doesn't eat anything that, as he puts it, that he has to
He
chase
doesn't-
down and kill to
well, He
eat.
doesn't even give a shit about this podcast.
No.
He said, "Boys,
No.
you can talk all you want because it's going right past
But you
me."
know what? I'm sure your vegetables that you're eating are as mislabeled as what we're talking about here. So don't go grinning at us, okay?
Yeah. I said honey for sure has been a target of this mislabeling industry.
Is that right? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, I've heard that. Yeah,
Really?
For sure. Yeah. Maple syrup is another one that's often mislabeled. There's all kinds of.
We are living in a fraudulent world, people.
So-
My God. It's all about the dollar, too. It's all about the dollar.
As consumers, what can we do to safeguard ourselves against this fraudulent
Go catch your
activity?
pickerel and then cut it up yourself.
There is
That's
that.
it.
There is that.
You know?
Of course, you need to know what the fish are that are around you first, right?
True,
So you need
yeah.
to educate yourself if you're going to go out fishing. Make sure you know
True enough.
the difference between your brown trout and your rainbow trout, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, no, you're not without defense as the consumer. There are a couple things that you can do. First is buy creatures that haven't been stripped of their identifying features. If you can't go out and catch it yourself, at least buy head-on whole fish.
Oh boy.
And certainly-
tough. That's tough though. I mean, really. I mean, that's really hard to do. You walk down a grocery store fish showcase, and yeah, there are a few fish there that are still whole, but the majority of them are just fillets.
Yeah, that's interesting. Calgary, we seem to be doing better on this. I've noticed our grocery stores over the last 5 years or so have introduced a whole range, like a broad diversity of head-on whole fish species.
Oh.
So maybe it has to do with the demographics around those grocery stores. But if you start voting with your wallet in that way, buying those head-on fish, and the grocery stores will follow suit and start stocking more of that product.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, that's certainly hard for tuna, or try getting a head-on halibut or something in your grocery store.
But there's also the fact that most of us, like we want that self gratification, quick and painless. We don't want to start cutting.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it. Filleting
deboning.
I knew.
I want to go and put my $20 down, and I want a chunk of fish, and I want to put it in the fryer or the oven, and I want to eat the damn thing right now.
Yeah. So the second thing you can do is look for certified products that, with, say, the Marine Stewardship Council or Oceanwise, or one of those sustainable certified labels. Those aren't perfect, but studies of DNA barcoding of those certified products have showed substantially lower rates of mislabeling compared to your typical product. So you're at least more likely to be buying what you think you're buying when you get certified sustainable products. That's a whole nother conversation over sustainable certification and whether they're actually sustainably harvested or not. But at least we know you're likely to get walleye pollock if it's been sustainably certified as walleye pollock. And then the other thing you can do is purchase species that have precise labels rather than ambiguous labels. What we found is, even though there's a lot of wiggle room in our naming conventions, like you can legally call something snapper and that can refer to 96 different species of snapper in Canada, totally legal. Or you can have something called tuna and it could refer to any of 14 different species of tuna that vary from critically endangered to least concern, totally legal. You can buy that. It's called tuna and it could be, extremely endangered or doing just fine and you have no idea. Totally legal. Focus on the products that have those precise labels. They're called Atlantic cod instead of cod. They're called Southern bluefin instead of just tuna. And you're both more likely to get what you think you're getting, and you're less likely to eat an endangered species if you're sort of targeting those creatures that are labeled precisely and are labeled with names that aren't endangered. You're more likely to be eating something that isn't of conservation concern. But again, it's not perfect.
Did your study show that there's more of this fraudulent activity taking place in, we'll call them the box stores of fishery, versus the fishmonger, in your neighborhood that's been there for 3 generations, bringing in fresh fish and having it unpackaged and selling it to you with an actual name on it? Is there any evidence that would lead us to believe that this is being done by the big chain stores and not the little mom and pop operators?
Yeah, well, in part because these were undergrads who were going out and targeting what was most readily available. It was mostly sushi restaurants and grocery stores, the big grocery stores that we targeted. And in those places, mislabeling rates were about the same. Okay. I went out and sampled a local little mom and pop fish vendor, who sold like whitefish and walleye and those sorts of things. In those very few samples, everything was exactly what I expected it to be.
Okay.
So, I mean, that was reassuring in a way. Calgary doesn't have a massive fish market like you might have on the coast. So we predominantly get our fish from restaurants and the big grocery stores. And in those cases, there's definitely a lot of mislabeling going on.
And I got my walleye from, I'm going to be a name dropper. It's not negative or bad. Costco, of all places. Costco has become one of the biggest retailers of fish in this country.
We buy our salmon from Costco all the time. Great, you get the great big chunk in it. It's just beautifully orange and
it's wonderful
skin,
looking stuff. It tastes great. Now, I mean, I'm going to go in there with a whole different approach. I don't even know how I'm going to deal with it, to be
We're
honest.
going to bring
with you.
Matthew in with his DNA testing equipment. There we go. Check it
I'll
out.
call the manager and say, listen, I want to buy some fish there, but I'm going to come in and DNA test everything you got in the shop. Are you good with that?
Well, you know what? You could probably, reach out to the University of Guelph. They're the pioneers of DNA barcoding, and they've done a lot of this fish testing. Wouldn't it be fun to just grab them and go to the grocery store and do some of
that'd
this
be
testing in your
awesome.
local supplier?
That would be awesome. That'd be fun. There's a TV show right there.
No kidding.
We have Fishing Canada episode.
I
Woo.
love it. I love it. What's next for you guys? Obviously, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Have you got different programs in place that will take this to the next level? Are you branching off into other areas of testing? What do you got? What do you got cooking?
Yeah, so my main question right now is around this legal ambiguity in naming and how to improve our naming practices in order to reduce mislabeling. So the big one right now is salmon. What we found is things that are labeled as Atlantic salmon were always Atlantic salmon, but if they were labeled salmon, which legally has to be Atlantic salmon, they were any number of things from tuna to tilapia to a variety of Pacific salmons and rainbow trouts. But our sample sizes weren't huge on this. So the next step is to have a couple comparators of species that are sold under these sort of generic ambiguous labels and the same species sold under precise labels, and compare rates of mislabeling between them.
Right.
Because then, we could make particular recommendations to the CFIA that just get rid of this salmon designator entirely, and it will prevent vast amounts of mislabeling, or get rid of that cod label. Perhaps if it's Atlantic cod and Pacific cod only, then we can get rid of some of our mislabeling. So trying to find, because there's no one size fits all approach, but finding some targeted areas where we can improve our labeling laws. So yeah, that's next steps. That'll take me for the next year or two.
And based on the conversation I've heard here today, there really is no difference between product labeling of aquaculture fishery versus wild caught ocean fishery. They've both been now exposed as potential mislabeling, or is there one more so than the other?
Well, a lot of products just aren't labeled as wild or farm, but it's something we do take note of. I don't have the statistics on that, but definitely, your tilapia is aquaculture raised,
of course,
but being sold as a wild caught fish.
But so is salmon. Salmon, right?
Yeah, that's right. And in that case, you're presuming you're buying aquaculture salmon and you're getting aquaculture rainbow trout instead. So it's just one farm thing being substituted for another, right?
Who is the largest exporter of tilapia? What part of the world? Or is it anybody know?
Mexico.
I mean, my guess would be China, but I really don't know. Tilapia is becoming big worldwide, but
it's a great alternative to a lot of other, I think, fish for consumption purposes.
Totally palatable fish, right? It doesn't have much of a offensive flavor to it.
Just tell us what it is. That's all.
Yeah,
buy tilapia at a nice reduced price.
How do you feel about? We just briefly touched on aquaculture. How do you feel about that whole pen raised food fish source versus wild caught versus where can you sustainably go with this industry that does not include contaminating wild waters and for wild fish? What's your position on all that?
Yeah, that's where I cut my teeth on aquaculture. That was my beginning at Dalhousie, was farmed and wild Atlantic salmon and what happens when they hybridize and escape and all this sort of stuff. So there's definitely some negatives to aquaculture when it's done along, say, wild salmon rivers, right? Like that's a real problem.
Yeah.
Inland aquaculture is pricier, but safer for the environment. I think you're not going to get those antibiotics sort of settling down from the sea cage and changing the ecosystem underneath. Exactly. And you're not going to get the predators that are targeting the sea cages right as the wild salmon are moving up the river, right? There's lots of issues there.
And escapees, right? Probably the biggest benefit of inland pens is the escapee factor. That's the biggest game changer, I think.
I was going to say that. Right. I was going to say with Perry Sound, we shot up a Perry Sound.
There you go.
My God, we shot a entire show about escapees, and I kept one to eat, and it was friggin' delicious.
Oh, sure.
Oh my God, was it good? It was a rainbow trout. I thought, oh, what's it going to taste? And it was so good.
get 100,000 salmon escaping right at the mouth of a river that historically supports 5,000 salmon, right? That's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
But then you have increased prices. So Canadian consumers just need to be aware that if they want to support aquaculture, they need to pay premium dollar for Canadian aquaculture products. We're just not going to be able to compete with, say, salmon raised down in Chile. That's always just going to be cheaper with all of its associated ecological problems. So as long as we're willing to pay a bit more, I do think aquaculture is feasible.
Should the consumer arm themselves with the knowledge of what is on the endangered species and what is not? And I mentioned earlier on in the program orange roughy. I used to consume orange roughy more than any other fish because it was delicious until, I started hearing the doom and gloom on that species. And lo and behold, about the same time I was hearing that, I saw a decline in orange roughy on the shelf. Is it something that we should maybe send that message out right now to folks that are tuning in and listening to this, that maybe as an informed consumer, we can curb some of these mislabeled products and or even the packaging of products that, like Chilean sea bass is another good example. Because obviously it's supply and demand. If there's no demand, we don't need a supply, and that would alleviate the problem.
That's right. Yeah, no, it would be wonderful if Canadians knew more about the wonderful fish diversity that we have around us and all their incredible behaviors and just their beautiful ways of being, rather than, I'm going to buy fish and chips. Like, let's think a little more seriously about what this creature is that we're about to consume and be grateful for this creature.
Yeah.
If we started, asking more questions about why do we need Atlantic salmon aquaculture in the first place? Well, it's the 70% decline in our native Atlantic salmon stocks in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, right? Then we could start asking maybe better questions about how to conserve those rivers and bring those fish back up to a level where they could be sustainably harvested again. Yeah, I'm absolutely all for letting people know, there's a reason tilapia is on the market instead of snapper, and that's because red snapper's not doing well. So it gives the illusion that red snapper's thriving because you can buy it everywhere, but actually you're not ever eating it. Yep. So yeah, absolutely. The more your listeners could be aware of the plight of our fishes, both in Canada and globally, the happier I am.
Where can they inform themselves? Can you send them someplace? Well, first of all, where can they get to read your studies and make their own conclusions? How can they reach you or whoever for this? Yeah,
so the paper's open access, so anyone can access it. It's in the journal Peer J. And it just came out this year. Look for mislabeled. Here's the paper right here, a copy of it. Mislabeled and ambiguous market names in invertebrate and fin fish, seafood, concealed species of conservation concerning Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So that's through Peer J, available online to anyone who's interested. They can email me if they would like at matthew.morris@ambrose.edu. That's MATTHEW MORRIS@ambrose.edu, or they can find all my publications at matthewmorrisbiology.wordpress.com.
Beautifully done.
Excellent.
That Dean is going to be happy. He doesn't have to do that at the end of the show, so you got it covered. Matthew, we can't thank you enough for joining us.
Yeah.
Obviously, we would like to leave an invitation to you at any time when you've got more information, maybe new breakthroughs, or a different direction that this fraudulent activity is going.
Or a message, just a message to the public. Yeah,
just reach out to us. We'll reach out to you as well, but reach out to us. Don't be afraid to give us.
I would be more than happy to do that. Thank you so much for having me. This has been an absolute treat.
Thank you for joining us. Wow, that's what I said 20 years ago when I first heard this story. I'll say it again.
And it hasn't changed much, has it?
I find it hard to believe.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe.
The regulations, there's no regulations, really, is what it sounds like.
Wow.
Matthew Morris, that was good. Man, I'll tell you. Now, I don't buy a lot of fish, but we do. We buy, like I said, we buy salmon, a little bit here and that. But
well, lately I have been.
You were saying.
Only because I just discovered it a few months ago at Costco, and I said, "Wow, you know what? Let me try it." I keep saying, that domestically, harvested walleye are not the same as when we do a shore lunch out in the wild.
Right.
But let me buy. And then I see on the label it says wild caught.
Right.
I'm envisioning. See, that's the other thing too. Wild caught to me means somebody was sitting on a point and throwing jigs out and caught that walleye last night. You know what I mean?
That
that's
would be
what
wild
labeling-
caught, but I'm assuming
that's-
would be legal commercial nets
Right.
in,
Netted
in
in-
Lake Erie or
exactly,
something like that. That's wild
exactly.
caught, right?
But I got to tell you, it's so good. I was even able to convert total non-fish eaters,
I've done that before with walleye. Yeah, that's the one species you can do it with.
and they're now hooked.
Yeah.
on it, so
right on.
so to speak.
I don't. That's the snapper one is the most alarming one to me. Obviously, if you're at a sushi bar, do not order snapper because you're not going to get snapper.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Or as Matthew alluded to, you're going to get snapper, but if you have a choice, why not go for a species that's not on the list as maybe snapper is, right? And that's why it's more difficult to find.
Right. 100% of red snapper and red snapper products are mislabeled.
100%.
So don't buy it, folks, because you're not getting it. Don't think you're having a little special snapper meal there. You ain't getting it.
That are it for us. That's interesting. I might not have my walleye dinner this weekend coming that I wanted to. I might just take a weekend off from it. Rethink
People
it.
doing it every weekend?
Yeah.
Wow, look at you,
because
eh?
of my diet, it's perfect.
Right.
It's perfect. So.
Right.
And I batter it with gluten-free.
Get the hell
I'm
out of
telling
here.
you,
Look
it's
at you.
Fantastic.
Gluten-free. You are a new man. You're a new man. Wash her down with a little whiskey, maybe?
Or two, or a beer. It doesn't hurt. Well, you have to have one.
Got to have a beer with that when you're having a fish, for sure.
Do you guys talk about the contest yet?
No, we're just going to that,
Okay,
Dean. But
sorry.
thank
I
you.
thought you were going to
to
sign off. I had been out of the room. I stepped out.
Thank you for.
We've been talking about the whole entire great podcast we just had, Dino. So
Okay,
we're still just ending on that sucker. So
That's why I can't sign off until we talk about this, because he put it up on the screen behind me. Do you want to win a 9.9 outboard motor? Of course you do. Mercury? Of course you do. Why wouldn't you?
4-stroke.
Well, now thanks to J&B Cycle and Marine, you have that opportunity. Just go to fishingcanada.com, enter the contest that's there now, and you could win yourself a fully functional, fuel-injected, electronic ignition, whatever the hell they come with.
And Mr. Pete has a bonus code for everyone.
Does he really? Let's go, Peter.
Mr. Pete has the bonus code for this week. So, people, if you want to have maybe 10 extra entries to this, this week's code is SUSHI. All capitals, SUSHI. Sushi. Type that in, and for 10 free entries towards all of our current giveaways, not just the Mercury motor and everything got going on there, huh?
If I didn't enforce this message enough, I just want to do it again. It's J&B Cycle Marine and Marine. See, I missed an N there too, right? And Marine. Ontario's largest Princecraft Mercury dealer.
It's an ampersand or whatever they call it. That's you're blinded out on that one, I think.
What'd you say? What'd you call me?
Ampersand?
I resemble that remark, whatever that means.
I got other ones for you, buddy. They're better.
Largest Princecraft Mercury dealer in the province. In operation since 1970, by the way. That's an interesting thing, too. Outboard motors, fully equipped Princecraft boats, fishing models, family models.
Great people that run it, too.
Rob.
Great people that run it. So, family-owned business, and they do a good job. So,
you can check them out at jbcycle.com. That's jbcycle.com, and get all the goods and details. Maybe you just drop them a line and say, hey, thanks for making this wonderful contest possible with the Mercury 9.9 motor giveaway, which is, I think, ongoing until Christmas.
Yep, that's right.
So depending on
what a
when
Christmas present. Woo-hoo!
That are it. I want to thank everybody for joining us. On behalf of our illustrious team, Vova, the non-fish eater over there, who will not be affected by the mislabeling unless his rutabaga is really a cucumber. Aha! See? There you go. Nick, nice to see you in the
rutabaga
house
was a car.
today. Well, that too. Dean Taylor,
Come on
our what is he today? Today, I call him producer.
He
last week.
he was a scrutinizer because he wanted to make sure we didn't miss
On the
that
contest.
when he came
He
out there.
keeps us
right?
on the straight and narrow. Sometimes
Yes.
it's like herding cats, I'm told.
Yes, indeed.
This guy here, he's Peter Bowman. I'm Angelo Viola. Thanks, folks. We'll catch you next time. This episode of Outdoor Journal Radio has been brought to you in part by the Invasive Species Center, protecting Canada's land and water from invasive species. Freedom Cruise Canada, rent the boat, own the memories. J&B Cycle and Marine, your home for all things power sports, boats, and equipment. And Sail, the ultimate destination for your outdoor adventures.